It took me 20 years to get my black belt. 6 months after I did, I suffered a terrible back injury and had to walk with a cane for another year and a half. Today is my first day back training, and since I need to take it easy, I figured it would be a good time to reflect on my non-linear, unconventional path to black belt. You know, in the beginning of the Barbie movie where Ken totally fucks up his back and then has to get on one of these things every single day? That's me now. Here we go. I started taking karate classes when I was 11 years old, primarily to deal with bullies. And turns out the owner of the closest karate dojo to my house was the original Green Power Ranger, Jason David Frank. I didn't know this, but pretty crazy way to start off your martial arts journey, if I do say so myself. I'll talk a little bit about it, but if you want all the details, I'll link the original video somewhere here. And I took to it pretty much immediately. I mean, I wasn't really an athletic kid. I played some pee wee hockey, but I loved everything about it. I was there for a little over a year before my family had to move out of state. So I had to quit, unfortunately. You like this? Should be keep training after the belt turns black. That first dojo, I mean, besides the fact that it was the Power Ranger and Power Rangers were huge at the time, it really set me up for a lifetime of pursuing martial arts. It was the crux of as cool as it could be, as fun. I mean, we played a lot of games where, and this is pretty common with kids' classes, you play something like dodgeball to work on their reflexes. Or I remember we did red light, green light to test your listening and comprehension skills. One of the one of the instructors would be like, "Okay, when I say green light, that means go," and we go, "Uh huh." You know, you don't understand. When I say green light, that means go. We're like, "Uh huh." I figured it out, and I walked up, passing everyone, pulled the karate bucks out of his hand, which was the reward, right? That whole system of karate bucks. But unlike a lot of dojos, they allowed the kids to begin weapons training, assuming you met the qualifications. Again, that's going to be in my Power Ranger focused video. The things we learned there were, I mean, a lot of it was like karate essentials, the basics, but we definitely focused on the flashy stuff, which makes sense coming from TV, movie star, etc., right? Like butterfly kicks, jump 360 tornado kicks. Those were all in the curriculum. So, so pretty cool when you're 11 years old. Now, it's been several decades since, and those were formative years, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but that was definitely the most fun I had doing martial arts. I mean, not only was it fun, but it changed my life dramatically. Being bullied constantly. Now I had power and agency. So I was feeling pretty good. It's unfortunate I had to leave when I did, but it eventually worked out. I often wonder where some of my classmates ended up. I think I've seen one of them, at least this was years ago. I thought I saw him on the website as an instructor. So I'd like to think that others continued to carry the torch, if you will. It's pretty common for kids as they become teenagers to quit or like find other hobbies. They get involved in after school activities, stuff like that. A little over a year later, I get my green belt, which is my favorite color, and he was my favorite Power Ranger. you know Very full circle moment. We ended up moving out of state, so I had to quit, obviously, and it would be several years before I would get another opportunity, and it kind of came out of nowhere. That's how a lot of interesting, life changing opportunities have shown up in my life. It's completely random. I was sitting in my high school drama class as a freshman. This guy walks in with a ponytail down to his ass. He spoke to the class and he said he was looking for people with martial arts experience for an independent film he was making in the area. I, of course, immediately shot my hand up. In retrospect, a little sketchy. So I talked to my parents and they agreed to let me do it. It was mostly adults. I was 15 at the time, and I think there was maybe one other teenager. Everyone else was, late 20s, early 30s. It was an independent gang war martial arts film. And I was in both gangs, actually. What's crazy is that 15-year-old Kyle looked like 12-year-old Kyle. And 12-year-old looking Kyle had a teardrop tattoo. So we actually got the cops called on us a few times for gang violence. We would mostly film in these abandoned structures in the middle of the woods, or one of them was actually a house that was previously a meth lab. It still had the caution police tape over it. We took it down to film and then got out of there. Remember, I did say it seemed sketchy, and it turned out I was right. We had a guy who was I think, luchador, the Mexican wrestler with the mask. He had enormous muscles. I think he did a backflip during his audition, so we definitely got that guy. Ultimately, a very strange experience. It was fun, but I met a lot of cool people. One of the people in the cast, her father was a karate sensei in the area. After spending some time with these people, seeing what they were like, it was nice to be around martial artists again. I decided to resume my traditional training. We met in the yoga room of a Gold's Gym. I think we maybe had 10 students total at our peak. Whereas my first dojo was flashy and sort of a throw everything in the kitchen sink at you in terms of curriculum, my second dojo gave me the most realistic training that I've ever had. On day one, I sparred with one of the black belts. He punched me in the face, and I bled all over my uniform, day one. I ended up getting back at him later. We ended up doing spear hand drills. into the abdomen, the solar plexus. And I had been training stiff fingers for a few months, and he had totally written me off at this point. He's like, okay, whatever. Boom! Laser into his gut. Knocked the wind out of him. I stopped getting hit in the face after that. My sensei there was a character. He looks like Jonah Jameson, the actor that plays that Spider-Man character. Short hair, big mustache. He was built like a tree trunk. He would regularly sit there and go, hit me with your full strength, any technique you want. And he would just stand there. So I'd run up, front kick to the midsection. I got moved backwards. No, really, give me everything. I'm like, Sensei, that was everything. Do it again. So side kick, boom, launching myself backwards. Didn't move at all. I mean, he felt solid. Like his clothes moved, but nothing else. I remember one of my buddies and we would really push each other. Really enjoyed the conditioning drills where we would literally just stand there and absorb blow after blow. Ich, ni, san. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, kicks. Ich, ni. Over and over and over. I had to quit many times. So this guy has a regular practice of kicking me in the nuts. Now, nut kicks, generically speaking, are illegal. However, it was my sensei's opinion that if you get kicked in the nuts 5 times in a row, it's kind of on you. You need to figure out how to deal with it. He had a good point. How I chose to deal with it is blocking with my elbows until I busted his big toe, and the nut kicks stopped shortly after. Funny story, this uniform actually belongs to that sensei's daughter because I would regularly bleed all over my uniforms. So after I went through like 3 or 4 of them, he eventually gave me his daughter's as a hand-me-down. And I've managed so far not to bleed on it. That dojo is where I experienced real sparring, and the hardest sparring I've ever seen in my life. And that includes the couple Kyokushin dojos I visited where even with the, we don't block anything, we just absorb strikes, still was nothing compared to the kind of damage I took and was allowed to dish out at this dojo. Now, I don't mean any offense to those schools nor the style as a whole. They are absolutely the toughest of us all. I had Kyokushin senseis at one of my black belt tests. I was often the uke, or the receiver of techniques, aka the guy you pick to demo your ass-kicking move on. So one day, Sensei's demonstrating a foot sweep where you trip someone, right? So I'm standing there. He's much larger than me. He's heavier than me. He sweeps my foot very quickly to the point where I'm spinning, right? And I see this all in slow motion because of how violent it was, right? Boom! I go horizontal, and I'm looking at him as I'm horizontal. He takes his hand, boom! Slams me on the chest, boom! And pushes me into the ground. Wooden floors, by the way. So I, bam! Knocks the wind out of me. And he goes, see? Like that. I'm sure my parents would have been mortified if they had known. But for a 15-year-old boy, that was exactly what I wanted to hear. That dojo is also where I got this hole in the uniform. Sensei was demonstrating a clawing technique, maybe kakyuke or something like that. He grabs and pulls, and his fingers ripped open the seam. And if you don't know much about these uniforms, they're made of like a canvas. Very difficult to tear with your fingertips. I've certainly never been able to approach anything like that. While I was at that dojo, I started lifting weights as I've always been a very thin guy, and I felt I needed some more muscle mass to punch up to a different weight class. It worked pretty well. I quit that dojo. Around that time, I started developing very bad acid reflux, and there was quite a lot of stress at home, some family issues. The combination just made me sick constantly. You know, as it turns out, getting your midsection assaulted literally is not the best when you have stomach bile erupting out of your esophagus. So I quit, and I focused mainly on lifting weights and generic fitness for the next couple years. Because I'm me and I'm unable to do anything less than the maximum degree, I put on 50 pounds of muscle mass by the end of my freshman year of college. I put on another 50 by the end of sophomore year. I weighed about 220. I was squatting 550, benching 3 plates. I had 17.5-inch arms, and I was finally the hulking monster that I dreamed of being. In the middle of a squat set, I tweak my knee, and it all comes crashing down. It was one of the loudest sounds I've ever heard. You're going to notice a theme of me reaching well beyond what most people would consider a wild success and hurting myself and then having to quit and pivot. Story of my life. So I blow out my knee. I can't lift for a while. I was prepping to enter competitive bodybuilding. So I had shaved my legs and, you know, I'd gone through the whole thing. So I was pretty soured. So one day, my roommate in college, in the dorms, had a meltdown and decided to lock me out. I wanted to give him some space, but I also had to. So I just wandered around campus until I made it to the multi-purpose room where, you know, most colleges will have big events, club meetings. Just so happened to be salsa dancing that night. I had never danced a day in my life. And if you asked anyone if I wanted to dance, they'd be, no, what are you talking about? So I take the class, and it turns out I'm actually pretty good. Salsa dancing is infinitely less complicated than martial arts or another complicated physical skill. For the men, at least, the leads have a very easy job. It's a lot of da 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 da. Look at her. because men are so rare in the dance world, everyone loved me. Oh, you're so great. We need guys like you. All the women, right, are coming up to me. Oh, please come back. So, I mean, I had to, right? So, in my natural style, I switched majors, started taking ballet, modern, choreography, kinesiology, all of the stuff to become a dancer. Now, mind you, almost everyone there in the program and most people in dance start when they're a child. So they have time to manipulate your connective tissues in ways that are kind of unnatural for healthy adults. So I was behind. So I danced for some days it was 6 hours, some days it was 14 hours of class, rehearsals, tech prep for shows. So I graduate, and because I'm a man in dance, immediately I get a job with a dance company. So, with a couple dance companies, I tour internationally for a few years. And then eventually, I mean, the requirements just became too much. I mean, you spend 9 months out of the year working 6 to 10 hours a week rehearsing. Then 2 or 3 months of performing, which involves taking, that time off from work because you have to travel. I mean, we spent 3.5 weeks in India, a couple weeks in Brazil. And that's not even counting all of the marketing stuff you got to do. You have to go to the fancy dinners and do a little show for all the rich people so that they donate. I mean, the schedule's it's very difficult to have a normal person job and be a dancer. Most people, they just have 8 or 9 different teaching gigs all across town, and they can maybe sometimes make it, often have to rely on a second income from a partner. So once I'm done with my dance performance part of my career, I got back into lifting weights because bulking up to almost double my body weight one time wasn't enough for me. So, round two, luckily, each time you do it, it becomes easier. But I was also much older, and a 20-year-old body processes 8,000 calories a lot easier than a 30-year-old body. As is tradition, I am approaching the limits of my physical capabilities, and I decide I really want the PR today. So I load up 585 pounds. After After deadlifting for almost 2 hours at that point, again, another point in the I'm stupid column, I lift the 585, I get it up, I put it down, I nearly black out because it turns out I tore a ligament in my spine on top of the scoliosis, which at the time I was completely unaware of. Somehow they missed it in all of the school screenings. I mean, I got screened for scoliosis before traveling abroad for dance for some stupid reason, and no one caught it then either. So I'm pretty much done lifting heavy from then on. I still tried. I tried some CrossFit, Olympic lifting for reps, but ultimately the straw was plucked, the camel's back had literally been broken. Anyway, so I take some time off. And yet again, while I'm recovering from an injury, I discover a brand new thing that I would like to physically transform myself in every single way for. So I start getting back into the martial arts again, but this time I wanted something modern, something that was real, like the real world, right? So I start taking Krav Maga lessons. At the same place, they also teach kickboxing. They do some grappling, some light jujitsu. Right before I was about to test for the next level up, the pandemic hit, and that gym was forced to close down. So I spend the next 2 years in isolation, taking online Muay Thai private lessons. So I'm just slamming a heavy bag for 2 years straight. Then as things start to get better, restrictions ease up on gyms in particular, I started looking for another karate dojo. I was tired of being a green belt for 20 some years. So, unlike my first dojo that was very flashy, and my second dojo that was super hardcore, this dojo was all about tradition, following the exact lineage, competition, mainly the WKF rule set. I had never really competed before, and I didn't really care about competing, but I think it's important to test yourself against others, at least in your region, to see kind of where you stack up. Because honestly, you never really know until you go see other people. And not just your dojo, but going out of state, going to internationals, it's different. Now, luckily, having stayed physically active helped me to bridge the recovery gap after such a long time away. And what really helped me, honestly, was the dance training. Not only was it just the physical training of getting your leg, your knee above your hips and holding it there, control, but learning choreography is very difficult, right? I might have to learn a whole phrase and then do it on the flip side. It is a very normal thing to tell you to do something one way and then reverse it right now and show it to me. Not something we really do in karate. All of our kata follow the same pattern. We don't ever do it backwards. And if you tried, it'd probably be pretty tough. So developing that skill set of creating this structure of the choreography in my mind that I could physically flip around in order to come up with the movement quickly. Because in auditions, if you hesitate, if you miss a step like that, that could be it. So you really need to be sharp and really need to be paying attention. Plus, the dance pieces that I would perform, our primary pieces were like 40 minutes to an hour long, plus 2 or 3 more 10 to 25 minute dances. So memorizing a minute 15 where every time you move, it's one technique is unbelievably simple after you've learned a 45-minute dance piece with 5 different people that you have to literally juggle in the air, and you have to make sure that everyone's on their marks and you don't drop anybody on their head in front of everyone. So I had a leg up in that. Now, remember I said I never really cared about competition. I had already sparred heavy and hard enough to kind of know who I could and could not handle. But it was important for my sensei, for the dojo. It was a competitive dojo, so as one of the leaders, it was important that I participate and, to a degree, prove that I knew what I was talking about. That if you want to pay for a private lesson, that I could actually get you the results you wanted. So the first competition is probably 3 or 4 months after I come back to karate. Still a green belt. Turns out most adults in the martial arts are either one of the very first few ranks because they're trying to get fit, something like that, or they're black belts because they did it as a kid. So there's very few adults in the mid to higher, like level advanced, pre-black belt categories. I smoked them all. I mean, it was a couple people, but that competition was easy. I over-prepared, and I could have won gold probably after a month back, which I never would have known had I decided not to give it a shot. So I'm like, hey, I'm not half bad at this stuff. So I go to compete again. And I won again, first place. Again, turns out there's a lot of overlap in physical performance quality between martial arts and dance. I mean, this is something that other people just didn't get. Commanding attention, getting people to look at the parts of you that you want them to look at. I had no problem coming up to these judges, and they'd be sitting, in a chair facing you, and you do your sequence coming forward, big kick, boom. I've got my kata face on. I go, yeah! Right here. And I could see my sensei going like, oh, don't ruin it. But the drama, the excitement, the intensity, again, things that were very easy coming from dance. It wasn't until I started going for the international competitions that my back problems really started to resurface. I spent the last year of my time at that dojo trying to work out how I was going to continue to practice with a bad back. I mean, I was able to kick anybody in the head. I could put my foot in your mouth, no matter how tall you were. And now I was becoming less and less able to do those things. Things that I could do easily and were sort of flashy things that I could pull out from dance, right? You think of dancer, you think they put their legs straight up in the air and they spin around. So I could only now do one of those things. But there was one trophy I wanted desperately. It was the Grand Champion Trophy. You had to win your division, then go on and win the Grand Champion division. And I did it. I got first place in empty hand kata. I got, I believe, first place in weapons. I used the bow. I wanted it so bad because the trophy is a karate guy going, oh, and he is hulking out of his gi. Hold on. This. I risked everything trying to get this trophy. This is how I see myself when I practice. While I was training for black belt, my original sensei, Sensei Frank, the Power Ranger, passed away. Very suddenly, of course. And as a grown man now, it was very strange. I had met him as a child, and he still seemed this tall, you know, spiked hair. I can still see the light reflecting in the hair, Joe. Really hit home that you never know how long you got. So you should start working on your goals now. For my black belt, I tested for my Goju-ryu and Isshin-ryu certification, my Shotokan certification, and my Shito-ryu certification in the same process. So the buildup took a lot longer than normal, but it ended up in, I tested several times with many different panels of senseis. So it took me a bit longer than normal to prep. I had different lists of kata requirements from different lineages and schools, different weapons. I also had to fight for 17 minutes straight, called the hyakunin, the 100-man. Every 10 seconds, you bring in a fresh opponent. And you are not fresh. It was a test not of seeing if you could defeat 100 people, and more that you would still be participating after 100 rounds. So I get my black belt. Everything's great. I've finally achieved this lifelong goal of mine. I was teaching karate as a black belt. People called me Sensei. Then I go to a tournament where some of my students were competing, and I ended up standing around for maybe 9 or 10 hours straight. Then the following week, I attend class. I continue to hurt myself. Before I know it, a month later, I'm completely unable to take care of myself, drive anywhere, wash the dishes, go get groceries. And that's how I lived for a year and a half, walking with a cane when I could walk, literally on the floor of the bathroom, weeping uncontrollably, unable to move or get up. I I woke up one day and couldn't feel anything on the left half of my body. Go to the ER, go to the orthopedic surgeon, go to the neurologist, go to the PT, your primary, get the CT scan, the MRIs. Let's do another X-ray. Basically, all they could tell me is, wow, you really fucked yourself up, didn't you? But essentially, they told me that my spine is, in addition to the extra just damage, right? Torn ligament. I've got bone spurs on my vertebrae. I've got no disc space. Not only that, but my spine looked like it was 20 plus years older than I am. It's been almost 2 years, and only now am I able to walk around and even attempt twisting at all. And look at me now. I made it. 2 years of PT. I was certain I was never going to be able to wipe my own ass again. But I'm here and I'm making it work. And if you can take anything away from my journey, it's this. It doesn't matter what your timeline looks like. Oh, what if I'm too old? I was too old to become a dancer, and I became a professional in less than 5 years. Oh, but what if I don't have the body? I've transformed my body plus and minus 100 pounds of muscle multiple times. Oh, but what if I took a break and it's been too long? I took a 20-year break. And guess what? I came back, and if you stick with it long enough, you get one of these. Are there people that are natural talents that will beat anyone no matter what? Yes, of course. There are freaks. You would be shocked at the things you can accomplish if you just continue showing up. And I'm not saying you just show up, where's my black belt? But if you put in the effort every day, there is a finite number of days before you reach a desired level of mastery. And maybe you won't be doing jumping spin tornado kicks, but maybe you don't need to. Maybe you can still have the things you want, the black belt, the become a ballerina, in a scalable way. I'm a natural, and it took me 20 years. It might take you a lot less, and you might not be a natural. So you might be younger than me and have achieved more than I have. Everyone's timeline is different. You can't compare yourself to other people. And I know everyone says it, and everyone says it to me. And I'm like, yeah, well, whatever. I'm still going to compare myself because I do what I want. Unfortunately, they're right. They're right. You can't compare yourself because other people took 15 years to do what I did in 3, and vice versa. So just try it. Just show up. If you can fall in love with the process, the end result will eventually come. It is guaranteed. If you continue putting one step in front of the other, the earth is a finite distance around. You will eventually get there if you do not stop. Maybe that means it takes more time for you. So what? You got time. Okay, check your Netflix history and tell me you don't have time. During a difficult time, maybe during a black belt test or when someone needs some encouragement, we used to say, "Gambare," which means you can do it. Okay, even when you're sweating, when you're injured, when you feel like shit, you can do it. Gambare.